Most pirates are remembered for noise, for cannon fire, for violence and chaos, but tonight's pirate changed the world quietly. He sailed with outlaws, crossed oceans most maps couldn't explain, and yet spent his nights doing something unexpected. He wrote, he observed, he listened. And the strange part is this: his words would later shape science, exploration, and history itself. So tonight, as you settle in to rest, let's drift back to a calm wooden ship under a dark, open sky and meet the pirate who paid more attention than anyone else at sea. Picture the ocean at night, not during a storm, not during battle, but during one of those rare, peaceful moments when the sea feels endless and time slows enough for thought. This is where our story begins. William Dampier was not born a pirate. He was born in England in 1651, far from the roar of the ocean. But the sea called to him early. By his teenage years, Dampier was already sailing, learning the rhythms of wind and tide, not as something to conquer, but something to understand. Unlike many sailors of his time, he was deeply curious. He noticed how birds behaved before storms, how clouds changed shape before the wind shifted, how the sea sounded different at night. And slowly, through circumstance rather than ambition, he found himself sailing alongside pirates, not the theatrical kind from movies, but practical men living at the edge of the known world. Here's the first curiosity loop. How does someone surrounded by danger become remembered for calm observation instead of violence? The answer lies in how Dampier spent his nights. As the sun slipped below the horizon and the ship settled into darkness, most pirates sought distraction. Dampier sought silence. When the deck grew quiet, Dampier would sit by lantern light with a small journal. He didn't write about gold, he didn't brag about raids. Instead, he wrote things like the temperature of the air, the direction of the wind, the way moonlight reflected off calm water, the smell of distant land before it could be seen. This was unheard of. At a time when most sailors relied on instinct and superstition, Dampier relied on attention, and this habit, this quiet discipline, would later make him famous. Here's the next loop. Why would scientists centuries later care about a pirate's bedtime notes? To answer that, we have to slow the ship down even further. Imagine the vessel anchored for the night. The sails are tied. The ropes creak softly. The ocean breathes against the hull. This is not a place of urgency. It's a place of patience. William Dampier became one of the first people to systematically document weather patterns across the globe. Without realizing it, he was laying the foundation for modern meteorology. He described trade winds, ocean currents, tropical storms, animal behavior across continents, all from the deck of a pirate ship. Charles Darwin would later read Dampier's work. So would Alexander von Humboldt. Think about that for a moment, a man sailing illegally across the world, quietly influencing the future of science. But Dampier didn't write for fame. He wrote because nighttime made him thoughtful, and because the sea, when calm, invites reflection. Next loop. What happens when a pirate becomes more famous for thinking than fighting? The answer brings us to one of the quietest moments of his life. As the crew drifted to sleep, hammocks swaying gently, Dampier would often remain awake a little longer, listening. There's something about being far from land that changes the human mind. Dampier wrote about this too. He noticed how isolation softened people, how long nights at sea encouraged introspection, how silence made emotions clearer. Modern psychology would later confirm this. The absence of noise allows the brain to slow, and Dampier lived inside that slowness. While others slept, he learned how the world behaved when nobody was watching. This is why his writing feels different even today. It doesn't rush. It observes, and that's why it works so well at night. Next loop. But what happens when a quiet observer lives among outlaws? Even calm pirates live dangerous lives. Dampier wasn't immune to hardship, but he processed it differently. Dampier was shipwrecked, abandoned, lost. Yet when he wrote about these moments, his tone remained measured. He described survival not as heroism, but as patience, waiting for tides, rationing food, watching stars. There was no drama in his words, only acceptance. And strangely, that made his stories more powerful, because they felt real. Here's the final curiosity loop. How does a pirate who never chased glory end up remembered centuries later? The ship sails on, time passes, and the world changes. When William Dampier returned to England, his journals were published. They became bestsellers, not because they were exciting, but because they were precise. They showed people a world that felt vast but understandable, a world governed by patterns, not chaos, and perhaps that's the most comforting part of his story. Even at sea, even among pirates, there was order, there was rhythm, there was calm. So tonight, as you prepare for sleep, remember this quiet pirate, a man who crossed oceans not to dominate them, but to listen. The sea continues its slow movement, the ship rocks gently, the lantern fades, and somewhere in the dark, a man closes his journal, content simply to have noticed the world. There is nothing more to do now, just like the ocean, you can rest.